Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session on the importance of risk assessment and root cause analysis in the QMS. My name is Cindy Haight. I work for SGS in the Certification and Training Academy departments. It's my pleasure to be here. We also have Sabrina Ippolito. She's going to be your speaker for today. I'm just going to go through a few opening slides to get us all oriented, and then we'll kick off with the content. I do want to bring to your attention that we have a Q&A section. So if you find any questions that come to mind throughout the session, please post your questions there, and we'll do our best to get answers to you before the end of the session today. If we don't make it to your question, we will do our best to respond to you via email, okay? Let me introduce Sabrina. Sabrina is a classically trained biochemist. She's a certified lead auditor who ensures organizations maintain compliance in a realm of different industries, certifications, and standards spanning pharmaceutical, cosmetics, and general manufacturing. She's directed, overseen, and improved several quality systems to reduce deficiencies and increase product flow across the US and Canada. She's affiliated with the Professional Order of Chemists of Quebec and the American Society for Quality. Sabrina speaks multiple languages, as I learned today, and she also does instruct for us through the SGS Academy. Just a little bit about myself. I joined SGS in January of 2022. I do come from, I've worked in the certification tech industry for about 20 years now. At my current role, I do assist customers with certification to various ISO standards, including ISO 13485. Of course, main focus today is ISO 9001 for quality standards. You can see a little bit about SGS here. We are the #1 leader in the TIC industry, that's testing, inspection, and certification. We have over 97,000 employees, 2,650 offices across 11 global industries. We are approaching our 150th anniversary, as you can see there on the right. So we've been in business for just over 140 years. We're getting to our anniversary here, and it's our pleasure to service our customers and partner with our customers. Here's a little bit about our Knowledge Solutions division for SGS. We can provide certification services and training services, as I mentioned. We do have the ability to provide customized audits. We do also have SGS Transparency 1, which is focused on helping you to manage your supply chain. And we also have technical consulting services. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Sabrina. Again, don't forget to post your questions for us. Thank you very much for being here. At the end of the session today, please look for a link. We do have our 3rd session coming up that's going to be focused on internal audits and management review, coming up June 16th. All right, Sabrina, take it over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cindy. I really appreciate that intro. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Ippolito. I will be helping you out during this learning event, which I'm very, very happy to be a part of. I have set for you a very brief agenda. We are going to break this up into 2 parts. The very first part will look at risk management. This is one of the aspects of quality which is very near and dear to my heart, because it really allows us to look at risk from a very holistic perspective throughout the entire supply chain. So the way I have this broken up for you is we're going to do a very quick, brief overview of risk management, what it is, what it entails, how to analyze risk and the interested parties involved while you're analyzing risk, and some tools and some examples that we can use with regards to risk. So in here, I also have some workable documents that I am suggesting. Again, it's recommended. It does not mean that you absolutely need to use the working documents. It's just to get you to think and to get the little hamster in the wheel rolling up in there, and maybe something for you to implement if that's the direction that you're wanting to go, or at least something, like I mentioned, to think about. The second part looks at root cause analysis. Again, very brief general overview on what root cause analysis is, how we can perform an RCA, a root cause analysis, and the interested parties involved in the activity. This is followed by some examples of tools that can be used, as well as we will end the day with Q&A, questions and answers. So without further ado, let's start. Here we are, part one, risk management. So what is risk management? Risk management is an actual process. It's a process of identifying, assessing, evaluating, prioritizing, and controlling the probability and impact of unfortunate events relating to financial, legal, strategic, and security risks to an organization's capital and earnings. Through risk management, organizations can equally maximize the realization of opportunities. While positive deviations arising from a risk can provide an opportunity, not all positive effects of risk result in opportunities. So essentially speaking, while we're doing a risk analysis of the organization, we also tend to find that there are opportunities, or we can actually identify certain talents within our organization through our employees that are working with us. So this actually can open up, if we will, a different revenue stream. So it's a really interesting take on within the quality system, in my opinion. And I prefer risk management just because it gives us a more proactive means of approaching issues, again, from a very holistic perspective throughout the entire organization, throughout the entire supply chain. So this is going to bring us to our first polling question. Is risk management proactively embedded in your daily operations, or is it treated as a separate process periodically? Example, once a year. Just wait a couple of minutes. This is always an interesting polling question. So about 57% of attendees that have submitted their response. Okay, so we have about 60% of individuals say that it's embedded in your daily operations. And this is actually kind of what you want to do. Because like I said, when you're considering risk, you're looking at risk from a leadership perspective. You're looking at risk from the perspective of your interested parties. And your interested parties are both internal and external of your organization. And when we think of internal and external, we're thinking of our employees that are working within the organization. We are thinking of our suppliers. We're thinking of our clients. We're thinking of maybe regulatory bodies or certification bodies. Those would make up the external interested parties. So we're looking at, for instance, what are the needs, the wants, the expectations? We can also consider doing a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats? So while we're looking at the weaknesses and the threats, these do become the risks that we want to look at, that we want to identify. So like I said, we're looking at it from a leadership perspective. If we consider the pyramid, second tier, we have interested parties. And on the very last part, we can look at it from a process. So we look at it in terms of all of the processes within the organizations, the activities that we do, and what are the potential issues there. Now, when we're thinking also about risk analysis, one thing I want you to think about is this is not something that should be done on its own. This is not an activity that should be done on its own. But I'd like for you to invite to the proverbial table interested parties. So who would be the individuals that you would bring in? Well, think of it when we're talking about sales, or we're talking about purchasing or receiving. We have a general idea where the risks are, but you would have a greater impact by inviting the individuals, the employees that are working in those departments, and leverage their knowledge, because they truly are subject matter experts, since they are carrying out the activity on a daily. So I want you to think about this. So without further ado, if we consider the standards today, like if we consider the ISO 9001:2015, the 2015 version of the standard, also if we consider, for instance, other standards that are out there, they really have thought about risk-based thinking. And this is really what they're emphasizing on. So the 2015 version of the 9001, which is a QMS, makes risk-based thinking more explicit and incorporates it in the requirements for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of the QMS. It's up to the organization to develop a more extensive risk-based approach than is required by ISO 9001:2015. ISO 31000 provides guidelines on formal risk management, which can be appropriate in specific organizational contexts. So if you are looking for further information, the ISO 31000 is a really good resource. Now, when we think of risk, we need to think about our organization. So for instance, if we're talking about an organization, a company that makes nuts, bolts, and rivets, their process for analyzing or looking at risk might be slightly different than an organization who manufactures pharmaceutical products, or an organization that's in medical devices. So the level of complexity of risk and how you decide to analyze risk should be in parallel with the industry and the organization that you're in. This is why it's important that you understand, who are you as an organization? Who are the interested parties within the organization? Who are your clients? What industry do you belong in? What are the expectations of your industry, of the services and products that you're offering? So when we think of risk management, we can look at risk from a plethora of ways. We can look at and we can manage risk from a qualitative perspective and also from a quantitative perspective. So as we're going to go through the slides, there are some templates that you can use. But like I said, I mean, these are really the conversation starters, and it's really to get you to think about risk more from a holistic perspective. Good. So let us consider the standard. Let's consider ISO 9001:2015, and let us focus and own in on section 6, on clause 6 of the standard, which talks about planning. So when we're looking at planning in clause 6, these are actions to address risks and opportunities. One of the key purposes of a QMS is to act as a preventive tool. So you're probably all familiar with the acronym CAPA, corrective action, preventive action. So when we talk about preventive action, we look at preventive action, or at least back in the day, was more of a reactive measure, or it was a bit more reactive in the sense that we waited for a negative event to happen before we actually did something about it. And then hopefully the negative event wouldn't happen again because we put a corrective action in place. Well, the 9001 version of the standard the 2015 version rather, removes preventive action and replaces it with risk. This allows us to be more proactive. So we consider risk, like I mentioned before. Consider a pyramid. We look at risk from three perspectives. We consider it from the leadership perspective. We look at it in terms of our interested parties. And we also consider it from the perspective of our processes. So one of the key purposes of a QMS is to act as a preventive tool, like I said. ISO 9001:2015 does not have a separate clause or subclause titled preventive action, naturally, because it's being replaced with risk. The concept of preventive action is expressed through a risk-based approach to formulating QMS requirements. So although risks and opportunities must be determined and addressed, there is no requirement for a formal risk management or a documented risk management process. So again, let me be specific here. The standard ISO 9001:2015 does not require you to formalize risk, meaning you don't need to have a document. However, even if they don't require you to formalize it, I often nudge people that I work with, my clients, to formalize it. Because what it does is it gives you a clear idea. These are the risks in these different areas. And it also gives you an idea in terms of what is it that we tackle first. So for instance, as an example, let's say you've decided that you do not wish to formalize risk, and you happen to win the lottery. And you decide, I'm not going to quit my job yet, but I want to travel the world, and I'll spend the year traveling the world. The individual who's going to be replacing you and who's going to have risk to deal with, how will they be able to fill your shoes if you have all of that knowledge in your head as you're traveling the world? So it's also a good idea to formalize it for a multitude of reasons, but also it gives you something to look at year after year after year, and also a starting point for the individual who's taking over your work, if need be. So this is one of the things that I often tend to tell people, think about this. So like I said, if we look at also clause 6 is going to tell us that we need to consider risk. So it will relate back to the context of the organization, and specifically sections 4.1, 4.2, and 4.4. And if we look at really what 4.1, 4.2, and 4.4 look like, 4.1 is understanding the organization in the context. This is what allows you to do a deep dive and identify who are you as an organization? Who are your interested parties? Where are the potential risks? So again, leverage tools. Leverage your tools such as your SWOT analysis, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. So again, from a leadership perspective, interested parties. This covers section 4.1 and 4.2, context of the organization. And planning, if you look at section 6, it does relate back to those two sections. In addition, it's also going to tell you to consider risk from a process perspective, which also makes sense. So this would be covered under section 4.4, quality management systems and its process. So how would this look like? Or where would you start? Well, the best way to start is to map down what is the natural process of the organization. So if we think of the natural process of an organization, we can look at this from the perspective of, we have sales. Sales then has purchasing, which when we purchase something, we then need to receive it. So then the natural process after is receiving. We need to plan and we need to schedule. Moving from there, we need to produce. From producing, there might be some quality control checks, some testing that is being done. From there, we might have warehousing, holding. We might even have shipping. Then we have our supporting functions. We have everything that falls under quality. We have HR as well. So when you look at all of the higher level structure within the organization, we can start to pinpoint and be a bit more granular and start directing and having these conversations with their colleagues, with the employees within the company. We can invite them and we can have these discussions with them, and we can leverage their knowledge and their day-to-day activities and where their caveats are with the tasks that they're doing. Like I said, from a higher level, we have a general idea in terms of what the risks are, and that's fine. It's okay to analyze those. But if you really want your risk management to speak volumes, encourage and invite people into the discussion. Also, what this is going to allow you to do is not only get a much clearer picture, but you will leverage and identify what is the actual probability and the impact, and get their feedback from the questions that you're asking. And you're making them feel part of the quality system instead of the quality system just belonging to a department, which is not something that you want. And as I said before on the previous webinar, that's one of the main goals of this version of the standard, is that the onus of quality and responsibility does not just fall on the responsibility of one individual who has the word quality in their job title, but really becomes the responsibility of a leadership team of the organization, because quality is the responsibility of every single individual that comes within the organization or that works in the organization. So think about that. This is going to bring me into my next polling question. So within your organization, is risk management a process conducted solely by mid to senior level leadership? So yes, no, or I'm unsure. Wait a couple more seconds. Last minute people putting in their information, their answers. Okay, let's see. So within your organization, is risk management a process conducted solely by mid to senior level leadership? Yes, it is. Okay. All right. So this is typically what I would normally sometimes see within organizations, or I end up seeing it's a nice hybrid between the two, leadership and other employees within the organization. So again, just be wary with this. Remember, when we talk about risk, if you really want to have an impact with risk and really use the strength of the tool, risk is certainly something that should be built within your quality system, within your processes, so that when you are actually, for instance, writing down your work instructions, or you are writing procedures, SOPs, you are actually embedding risk. You have risk in mind. One, like I had mentioned earlier at the beginning of the training, one of the main focal points in many of the standards today is that they really have risk at the heart. So all of the processes, the work instructions, the forms, the registers, the logs, the procedures, all have risk or have considered risk and have created the SOPs that they are. Another thing I want to mention is that if this doesn't happen to be, let's say, necessarily your cup of tea, or it's not necessarily your reality, and where you already have a quality system that you inherited, or a quality system that's existed for many years, as you're doing your review, as you're reviewing your SOPs, your work instructions, invite people, invite the individuals, the pertinent individuals in that department, in that do that activity, and see if there's better ways or a way to mitigate risk. Because remember, risk, we might have risk, but we can't necessarily eliminate risk. Sometimes the best that we can do is mitigate it. So invite individuals to the proverbial table. Use your tools, use your corrective actions, use your non-conformances. Look at your non-conformances and see, what are my 3 biggest non-conformances throughout the year? That's probably where your risk is. So what you're going to do is you tackle the beast a little at a time. We're not expecting for you to go from 0 to 100 overnight or to build Rome overnight. What we are looking to see is that there is a consistent and a constant improvement. So do think about risk. And when you are reviewing your SOPs, think about it. Are there potential risks that I need to think about? If you don't have the answer, invite people and have the discussion with them. Great. So putting it all together, when identifying and evaluating risk, involve pertinent individuals to partake in the exercise. Their expertise is invaluable and paints a better picture of the situation. It actually does, in comparison to just generic information to say that, yep, I did my risk for this year. Consider and identify and evaluate risk, like I said, based on 3 categories. From an organizational perspective, so this is where you invite leadership, senior level management, the C-suite to the conversation. Consider risk as your interested parties, where you can look at internal and external interested parties, and I had given you some examples of what that might look like. And consider it from the perspective of your processes, of your activities, of your departments. Also, another thing for you to think about is think about any legal or regulatory or environmental or any other requirements that you must adhere to, and ask yourself, are you actually adhering to? So for instance, pharmaceutical organizations, their regulatory bodies that they would need to worry about would be, let's say, Health Canada or the FDA or any other organization or country that they're working with. So in that territory within that continent. So think about that. And what's the impact that it's going to have within your organization? So when we look at the organization, again, one of the things I highly recommend that you do is create yourself a higher order structure. So what are the natural steps, the natural departments, the natural process within your organization? So as product comes in, or as you receive a request for a service, what does that look like within your organization? How do you go from the start to the very end? What does that roadmap look like? And remember, every activity has an input. There is actually an output that is generated from doing that activity, which becomes an input to the next process. So think about that. Think about all of the procedures, the work instructions that relate to the process. Invite people to the proverbial table and have that discussion with them. Interested parties. This is another way. This is one way that you can actually show your interested parties. So I'm a huge fan of Excel. I love Excel just because I can build, I can add in extra cells, I can just play around with this. So you don't need to be a genius when it comes to Excel, thankfully, because I'm definitely not one. But this is one way that you can show who your interested parties are. So you would list your interested parties on the left-hand column. You would do your interests, your concerns, your needs, and your expectations, both from the organization towards the interested party and from the interested party towards the organization. So it becomes almost like a two-way direction road. Consider the strengths, consider the weaknesses, consider the opportunities, consider the threats. So I gave you an example of what that might look like when we look at internals, when we're looking at management being an interested party. Also, what are you using to control? What's your control and your verification method? Are you doing internal audits? Are they management reviews? Are you hitting, are you looking for certain KPIs that falls in there? It's a good idea to document it. Again, not required to document. The standard does not say you must document it, but it's certainly a good idea to document it because it gives you something to think about when we see something on paper. From the weaknesses, from the threats, from the concerns, we can identify where those potential risks are. Now, I want you to think about this. So keep this slide in the back of your mind because we are going to go back to it. From a process perspective, you would do something very similar. So what are the processes within your organization? So the process for manufacturing a product, or what is the process for providing a service, right? Because when we are working within an organization, it's one of two things that we're doing. We're either producing something or we're servicing a service to a client. So what is the natural process from start to the very end? And even here, you will invite individuals to this proverbial table. You will help direct the conversation and you'll ask the conversation, what are the issues that you are currently faced with in your department in carrying out this particular task? And you leverage their information, document as much as you possibly can. Sometimes they might say, well, we don't really have a problem. Okay, well, did you think of any opportunities to improve what you're currently doing? Is there maybe a method that we can implement which would make your tasks more efficient and effective to carry out? So ask these open-ended, these closed-ended questions to help navigate the conversation. And you'll document all of this good stuff. So you document what are the potential risks, and also, are there any potential opportunities, which will get converted into opportunities for improvement and in projects for the following year. Good. So we have very different ways that we can analyze and assess risk. We can use a qualitative perspective, something very similar to what we have here, where we're just using words: minor, moderate, major, likely, possible, unlikely. It's important that you define, however, what the probability is within your organization for minor, what it would look like for moderate, and what it looks like for major. So because remember, I mean, if I ask you, what is the event of having a cyber attack within your organization, someone might say, oh, it's moderate. This can certainly happen. Someone else might look at it from the perspective of and saying, well, it's minor. We've never had that happen in the last 2 years. So it really does depend. This is why whenever you're going to use a qualitative risk assessment, if that's the way that you prefer to go, which is fine, just define what is meant by minor, by moderate, and by major. Same thing with likely, possible, and unlikely. What I prefer, but again, this is not the Sabrina show. What I prefer is something that's quantitative. So I like a 5x5 matrix. You can use a 10x10 matrix. You can use a 15 or 20x20 matrix. I like it simplistic. And for me, what really works for me is a 5x5. So you'll notice that for the probability of occurrence, I have remote, and I'm saying there's a less than 5% chance of happening. Unlikely to occur happens anywhere between 5 to 9%. Moderate is 10 to 50. I am defining what remote, unlikely to occur, moderately likely to occur, and highly likely to occur. I am defining that. And again, this needs to be okayed by the organization too. So by the C-suite, by leadership, by individuals that are maybe at the same level as you are in the organizational diagram, if that's what you want to call it. But this has to be all agreed upon. So once you define that, okay, well, there's a certain level of risk that we feel comfortable taking. This is what we like to present in terms of what remote, unlikely, moderate, likely, and highly likely to occur would look like. Once you've defined that, do the same thing for impact. Remember, this is organization and company based, okay? Take, for instance, a company of just one person. When we're looking at impact, Catastrophic might look like something, for instance, a $10,000 hit, because the individual just isn't generating that sort of revenue. So an organization which is much larger might consider catastrophic at in and around $1 million. So this is why defining the parameters becomes essential. Once that's okay, then you have a tool that you can use. So now what you do is that you're going to put all of this good stuff together. So do you remember what I told you to keep in your back burner, in the back of your mind, where we looked at who our interested parties are, what are the weaknesses, what are the threats, what are the potential concerns of our interested parties? These are things that we want to evaluate. And then we're looking at the risks from the perspective of the processes. And we're going to put all of this together and we're going to evaluate. And we will put all of this on, again, an Excel spreadsheet. So I have it laid out here like this. So again, from an organizational perspective, we invite individuals, upper management, mid, senior level management, C-suite to the conversation, and we start asking these pertinent questions. Competitors coming onto the market, what does that look like? Compliance, responding to new health and safety legislation. Maybe theft might be an issue. Perhaps cybersecurity might be a threat as well. So this is what typically is from an organizational perspective. We do the same thing with our interested parties. We tabulate that, and the same thing with our processes. We look at the risks and we document everything. And the beauty of this, and I'm going to go back one, the beauty of this is that from 1 year to the next, or even when we're doing a follow-up within the year, we can say that we have an issue at 20. So this is in red. So at 20, we absolutely need to put a corrective action in place. You put in the corrective action, but you also determine that after having put a corrective action in place and followed it through, that you did in fact reduce the risk, maybe even to a 15, and you're still in the red zone. But what you're showing by doing it quantitatively is that you are reducing the risk. So this is still something that requires you to maybe put a few more checks and balances in place. However, you are demonstrating that no, you're not able to eliminate the risk, but you can reduce the risk. And that there are additional measures in place to ensure that you are doing your best efforts to mitigate that risk. So this is one of the strengths of having a risk assessment that is conducted quantitative. Good. So this now brings me on to part two. Part two, we are going to be looking at root cause analysis, or abbreviated as RCA. So what is root cause analysis? Well, root cause analysis is used to determine why a nonconformity or an incident occurred. Most root cause analysis conducted by organizations are flawed. And I have a beautiful anecdote I'm going to share with you on this one. And that actually did happen. It's very difficult for me to make these things up. They only look at the superficial reasons like apathy, human error, another section was responsible, head office made me do it, so on and so forth. If we really stop and we take the time to do a proper RCA, a proper root cause analysis, we will identify that 90% are in fact management system deficiencies. So I'll give you an example. This is something that actually happened to me at the start of my career, maybe about 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, I was auditing a facility, I was auditing an organization, and the quality individual, so the individual who was hosting the audit, she must have been in and around my age. So she was in her early 30s. And it happened to be that I was auditing corrective actions. So through auditing corrective actions, I happened to pick up a dossier, I picked up a file, and auditor's luck, right? So I looked at it and I noticed that her corrective measures were to, well, the incident was that an individual slipped, fell down, and severely hurt their knee. So what this individual did, this individual was actually, I think 6 weeks, in 6 weeks, they were going to be taking their retirement. So he severely hurt his knee, which He had to go on short-term disability. And by that time, I mean, he already fell in retirement. So he was no longer with the organization. But what really stood out to me was the reason that happened. Her reason being the root cause of that issue, of the event happening. And her corrective measure was to show this individual, so let's call him Bob, was to show Bob how to walk in a warehouse and be careful and watch out for oil spills so that he doesn't slip. That was her corrective action. So I said, okay, hang on a second. Let's back the trolley up. We have an individual that works on the plant floor. They fell down, they hurt themselves. And now your corrective measure is to show them how to walk through the floor or how to walk through the warehouse. Yes. Okay. I said, well, which machine was leaking oil? So she told me it was the brand new one. I said, okay, well, we're going somewhere. At least we know which machine it was. And I asked her, I said, well, when was the last time you did PM? And very snarky, she answered me. She says, I don't know. I don't do PM. I said, well, who does? And she says, well, our maintenance individual. So I said, bring him in, call him in. So he comes in. Hi, how's it going? My name is Sabrina. I'm here to do the audit. And I'm also here to investigate what happened on this particular incident. So I had asked him, I said, when did you receive the machine? He's like, oh, we received the machine maybe about 2 years ago. I'm like, beautiful, because I noticed it was a brand spanking new machine, beautiful little work of art. But when was the last time you did PM? And he's thinking about it. And he's like, I don't believe I have. Oh, well, why haven't you done PM? And his answer was, well, it's just not scheduled. I don't know. I just not scheduled. I don't remember having done it. So I said, okay, so now we're getting closer. So the real reason that nonconformity or that negative event happened is not because Bob does not know how to walk in a warehouse. It's because you don't have a process for implementing new machinery onto your PM schedule. That's the reason. So we were able to get to the root cause from doing a very simplistic test or doing very simplistic method of root cause analysis, which is the 5 whys analysis. This is just one of many that exist. So let us consider a process. Root cause analysis, what does this look like? Well, you want to realize what the problem is. In this case, we did. Bob fell down and he got hurt. Gather all of the data, gather all of the information that you possibly can. Determine the possible causal factors or what can potentially cause that from happening. Identify the root cause. Again, not meant for you to do alone. Do this with a team. And then recommend and implement solutions. So there are possible tools that you can use. I know many engineers, they love using the failure mode effects analysis. Some organizations might use fishbone diagram. This is one that I like. Other organizations might use the 5 whys analysis as the one that I had shown you just earlier with our example with Bob. Some companies might use the fault tree analysis. It needs to be very proactive. And it's not just, so even when you're developing, let's say, your root cause procedure or process or higher order level process, don't tie people in. There's different ways that we can get to the answer. So give people the leeway of saying, all of these exist. Use what makes sense for you. Use the tool that will let you arrive to your conclusion. So what tools does your organization utilize to analyze root cause analysis or to analyze the root cause of an undesirable event? Just wait a few more seconds. Okay. The 5 whys. Yeah. And fishbone diagram. These are the two that I typically see within organizations. I'm not surprised. Awesome. Good, 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 good. Again, it's whatever allows you to get to the cause, to the root cause. So whatever method you choose should work. I mean, and again, if it doesn't work, remember, this is not foolproof. If it doesn't work, if you notice that we're still up there, trend hasn't really changed all that much, we're still getting the same non-conformances, not a problem. Go back to the drawing board. Maybe it's something else that you haven't thought of, and that's okay. Basically, even as an auditor, even for yourselves, what you're looking at is that, or what we're looking at is that you are constantly and consistently trying to improve. So all of this does get documented. You are going to take credit for the work that you're doing. In doing so, you'll document exactly what you did. Even if it means having a meeting to redo a fishbone diagram, or to maybe go through the process of the 5 whys again, but with a different team, the intent is really to be able to address the root cause so that we can start seeing a tendency of non-conformances decrease. And this is what we want. This is what we're trying to promote. Good. So these are just some examples. So this is something, this is an example of what a fishbone diagram might look like. We consider the higher order, the higher level. We're looking at measurements, methods, machines, materials, people, and environment. And we start looking at where the potential issues may have arose. Again, invite people to the table. This is not homework that should be done by one person. 5 whys analysis, the example that I gave you with our friend Bob. Remember, Bob was only old enough to be this person's father, but yet this individual showed Bob how to walk throughout the warehouse as a corrective measure. It doesn't make sense. And that's another thing I want you to think about, is before you start saying, oh, it's an individual's problem or it was their fault, before we start the finger pointing game, be very wary of this. We are trained to look for this. So when we see that it was human error, we will dig and we will dig and we will use the method like the 5 whys analysis, and we will try to investigate further to really see if it was in fact human error, or if the error really did stem from the system, from your management system. This is another example. This is one that I often see within engineering firms or within more complex processes. Organizations will use the FMEA. This is still yet another example. Again, you can leverage whatever method that you want. If you want to limit the methods within your organization, that's your prerogative. However, that is probably not something I'd want to limit my employees to. You want to give them as many tools as they possibly can use so that they can more easily get to finding what the root cause of the issue in fact is. So is RCA, root cause analysis, managed by one individual or one department, or is it a collaborative effort between departments within your organization? Wait a few more seconds. I definitely want to zip through the training as much as I can, because I know that there's some really good questions coming in and I want to allow for those questions. So try to get your answers in as quickly as you possibly can. Okay, let's see. It's a collaborative effort between pertinent interested parties. That's excellent. And I'm happy to hear that. This is very, very good, because it does certainly paint a much better picture. And also, it doesn't become a daunting task for one person to do who knows nothing about a process. So you definitely want to bring in pertinent individuals to the proverbial table and have these discussions. Excellent, fabulous. So this is an example of what an RCA report would look like, a root cause analysis report. Again, The complexity of this document will depend on your organization. So this is a very simplistic version, but it does have some very key elements on there. I want to bring your focus and your attention to the sections. So section 1, you have the description of the nonconformity or risk. What is the immediate action that you will do to address it? So in this case, with the example with Bob, it was to clean up the oil spill. You don't want oil to just stay underneath the machine and collect while you're doing the paperwork. No, you want to clean up the oil spill, do the best that you can in cleaning it up, maybe put some absorbent material on it. And then once that's done, go do your paperwork. Section 2, you might want to analyze risk here. So what was the risk when that event happened? What happened? What is it in terms of probability? How often does that happen? What is it in terms of impact? What does that mean for the organization? What was the level of risk when that event occurred? Root cause analysis, this is where you get to use your fishbone diagram or your 5 whys or your FMEA or any other method that you so wish to choose. And then you start creating an action plan. This is important. Remember, we are not writing a dissertation. This is not a thesis. I don't need to see a 15, 30, 40, 50, 100-page report unless it actually unless that's actually required. So for an action plan, I want to see step by step, what is it that you're going to do first, second, third, fourth, fifth, to be able to mitigate the issue so that it doesn't happen again. Who are you assigning that step to? This is not the time for you to put the individual's job title. This is where you actually name the individual because they have the responsibility to making sure that that step is being done. The due date, you can speak it in terms of a specific due date, like for instance, May 8th, 2023, or you can speak in terms of months, May 2023, or you can speak it in terms of quarters, Q2 2023. So you don't need to be so specific with the dates. I'm giving you options. These are viable, these are allowed. You can use this. And then as you're doing your follow-ups, whatever your periodic follow-ups might look like, whether it's on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a bi-monthly basis, this is where you would document when the task was completed and fill up on the table on the column on the far right. Section 5 is your follow-up because you are expected to do some sort of a follow-up. And then you can reanalyze your risk to determine what did we do in terms of risk? Were we able to eliminate the risk or did we at least reduce the risk? This brings us to the final slide where we have review how to evaluate the effectiveness. So you definitely want to review the nonconformity description. So what happened? What was the event? You want to review the root cause, ensure that the corrective action proposed addresses the problem and the root cause. Verify that the corrective action is in fact implemented. And you want to verify that the corrective action has prevented the nonconformity. This may require a waiting period. So in the case of our friend Bob, maybe the waiting period might be until you receive another piece of equipment to ensure that whatever process was put in place is actually giving you that intended result, meaning that that equipment was put onto the preventative maintenance schedule. And that's all I have for you folks.
Thank you, Sabrina. That was an awesome session as usual. Thank you for sharing your our contact information. If you have any questions, if you wish to reach out to us directly, please feel free to do that. We do have lots of great training classes coming up. So if there's any questions about that, please email me. I'm Cindy Haight. Now, let's see if we have a couple of questions. I know we have some questions to get through. So Sabrina, here's a question. How will I sell the idea of a QMS to my management team? And that's a great question.
That's an awesome question. Okay, so you're gonna have to use some of your creative juices. So what QMS does, it's not strict. It's not a regulatory requirement, right? It's not a regulatory standard. So the way that I would probably sell it to management is that it creates and it streamlines the processes so that everybody that's working in a department all works the same way. So you build the process together as a team. They become the process owners, but you document, okay, so this is exactly how we need to work. Because even though the standard does not require you to formalize and have all of these documents and SOPs and work instructions, what it allows you to do is it allows you to say, okay, let's just look at what is necessary. Maybe I don't need to have an SOP. Maybe it doesn't need to be higher order. What I do want to have, however, what I am trying to control are the critical processes. And that's what needs to be established. You leverage the information from these individuals, and then you make sure that everybody does what is expected for them to do in exactly that process. So how I would probably sell this is that it's going to reduce the number of nonconformances. It's going to reduce the number of scrap. It's going to increase productivity. It's going to increase efficiency. And hopefully it's going to increase revenues and sales. And also customer satisfaction. You want people to come back. So it's a way to control, but not from a regulatory perspective. It's just a way to ensure that everybody's working more efficiently, more effectively, and to ensure that all of the risks are being adequately mitigated. That's how I would probably sell it.
Okay, here's a great question. What is the most effective root cause analysis methodology in your experience?
So it depends. Again, it has to do, it's industry related, or it's very much organization related. So the method that I prefer is are the 5 whys, 5 whys and fishbone, which is actually what came out in the in one of the polling questions, the top 2. That for me tends to work super well. I know that I managed to pass a few regulatory audits going through root cause analysis through the 5 whys and also through fishbone. So they both work very, very well. It depends on how you use the tool.
Okay, I just wanted to share a quick comment as a contribution to the first question. To sell a QMS to management, you can tell them it's an investment in the company. Yes. I think that's an excellent point.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Good one. Very nice. I can always think quickly on my feet.
So here's a question. Does SGS offer insurance carrier partnership training for risk control engineers, as well as insured clients, product audit assessment services, PFAS, cybersecurity, all of those things you can contact me via email, and I would be happy to connect you to the right person. Sabrina, do you have any comments about training opportunities or anything else that you can share?
Well, with regards to training, all depending on what it is that you're wanting. So one of the things that SGS is really, really strong with is that we can tailor, especially if it's a private course, we can tailor your needs in training. So if we have a discussion with you to find out better what it is that you're looking for, why it is that you're looking for it, maybe we can either suggest something that already exists, or we can actually put together a training docket for you. And we can provide you that training both on site or remotely.
That is excellent. Thank you, Sabrina. I do want to just say thank you to all of our attendees. We are almost at the top of the hour, so we're going to have to wrap up the session. Any questions that we did not get to, we will reply via email. I do want to let you know that you will all receive a copy of the slides and access to the recording, so you can share that among your team, and please direct them to the link. They can register and view the webinar, and there's also an entire catalog of other webinars that are available. So thank you so much. Please remember that our next session is coming up June 16th. You will receive information about that as well. And we will be discussing internal audits and management review. Thank you guys. I hope you have a great afternoon. Happy Friday and have a great weekend.
Awesome. Take care.
Thank you.